Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. And today we are diving into the world of Florida real estate. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at the insurance situation over there. It's a market that's really sending out some signals, and we want to take a closer look at it. So
Yeah.
whether you're an investor or you're just curious about real estate trends, this is definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, imagine this. You're thinking about beachfront properties, picturing yourself sipping lemonade on a porch
Hmm.
as your rental income just rolls in. But then you get hit with the reality of the insurance market in Florida. We're talking about homeowners seeing insurance premiums surge by, 350% in just the past 5 years.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It really is. And that dream of passive income, well, it starts to feel a little less certain. So what we're seeing is almost like a perfect storm brewing. And I mean that quite literally. When you've got increased hurricane frequency and intensity on top of skyrocketing construction costs,
Hmm.
it creates this situation where insurance companies, well, they're fleeing the state.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable in a way. It's a classic case of risk versus reward. And for insurers in Florida, that risk has just become too high. The traditional model of spreading that risk through reinsurance treaties, which is basically insurance for insurance companies. It's just becoming more difficult and way more expensive. And this is hitting Florida even harder because of how vulnerable it is to hurricanes and the sheer volume of properties that are insured.
Right. So let's break this down, in terms of like actual numbers. Back in 2019, the average Florida homeowner was paying about $150 a month for their insurance,
Yeah.
which comes out to what, a little over $1,800 annually. Not cheap, but manageable for most. But now jump ahead to today, and we're talking $6,000, $7,000, even $9,000 a year for insurance.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
That's a massive difference.
And it's not just those, affluent homeowners who are feeling it. Imagine being a retiree on a fixed income in Florida. Suddenly, this insurance payment that used to be just a line item in your budget, it's tripled or even quadrupled for some people. Can you imagine being forced to choose between insuring your home and putting food on the table?
It's a scary thought.
It's the reality for a lot of Floridians.
And it's not just about the financial strain either. This situation's pushing people to make really risky decisions. And we're talking about the, going bear phenomenon,
Hmm.
where homeowners are basically saying, forget it, I'm not going to have insurance at all.
I can't believe people would risk that.
Almost 20% of Floridians are uninsured right now. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's even more than I thought.
It's a gamble.
Oh, it is a gamble for sure. The average cost to rebuild a home in Florida right now is about $275 per square foot. So imagine a hurricane hits your neighborhood. You have even moderate damage. Without insurance, you are responsible for all those repair costs, which could easily spiral into tens of thousands of dollars, potentially even hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, that's enough to make anyone nervous.
Yeah.
And it really highlights just how fragile the situation is. Now, when private insurers start running for the hills, you often see the government stepping in to try to fill that void. In Florida's case, that safety net is Citizens Property Insurance. It's a state-backed insurer that was initially created for those really hard-to-insure properties.
Right. And so Citizens, it was never really intended to be the primary insurer for, a huge chunk of the state's homeowners. It was meant for those unique, high-risk properties that private insurers were hesitant to touch. But as the market tightened and private insurance became more and more difficult to get, more and more Floridians started turning to Citizens as their only option.
So Citizens, this insurer that was supposed to be a niche player,
Yeah.
suddenly found itself as the go-to for a lot of Floridians. So how did that impact the market, and what does it mean for homeowners? So Citizens found itself in this unexpected position.
Yeah, they did.
So how did that impact things?
Well, as Citizens' customer base got bigger, their financial exposure grew too. And that raised a lot of concerns about, what would happen if a major hurricane hit. Would Citizens be able to pay out those claims? Would it fall on taxpayers? It became a really hot topic.
A political hot potato, you could say.
Exactly.
And then in 2022, Governor DeSantis, concerned about this financial risk with Citizens, he pushed for some reforms to try and reduce, how many people were relying on Citizens, and to encourage more private insurers to come back to the Florida market.
Right. And the goal was to make the market more stable. But it also had this kind of unintended consequence of limiting options for homeowners even more.
How so?
Well, you had Citizens pulling back, and a lot of private insurers were still really hesitant to insure those high-risk properties.
So it created this gap.
Exactly. And into that gap stepped these new kinds of insurance companies. Slide Insurance is a good example.
Yeah, Slide's an interesting one because they're not like these big traditional insurance companies. They're really focused on using technology and data analysis to figure out risk.
Right. It's an approach that could be really innovative, But it's also raising some eyebrows.
Yeah, what's the main concern there?
Well, there's this tendency for Slide to kind of cherry pick those lower risk properties, which leaves the people in the high risk zones with even fewer choices.
That's a double-edged sword then.
Yeah, some homeowners are benefiting from lower premiums, but for others, it's making affordability and availability even worse.
It's like this impossible situation where everyone's trying to stay one step ahead of the storm.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about the human cost of this crisis. I mean, we've
Right.
talked numbers and market dynamics. But behind all of that are real people
Absolutely. These are real stories.
facing these really difficult choices.
Our research uncovered stories of retirees who are draining their savings just to afford these insurance hikes, families who are being forced to move because they just can't afford to live in their homes anymore, and the people who are still dealing with damage claims from previous hurricanes. The uncertainty is agonizing.
It really highlights the urgency of the situation. This isn't just an abstract problem. It's about people's lives, their homes, their sense of security. And, for investors, this all presents a really unique set of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days of easy money in the Florida real estate market.
Yeah.
Those rising insurance costs really cut into your bottom line. They impact your cash flow, your profitability, and ultimately the return on your investment.
One investor we spoke to said, unaffordable private insurance is a risk signal. It's a red flag.
It is.
Now, I know some people might be thinking, well, this is just a Florida problem. It's not.
Not even close. Climate change is causing more frequent and more severe weather events, not just in Florida, but all along coastlines.
Yeah.
And that's putting pressure on insurance premiums everywhere.
So where do we go from here? What does this mean for the future of real estate? Especially in those vulnerable coastal areas like Florida, we're talking about a potential paradigm shift,
Right.
like a whole reevaluation of what it means to live and invest in these areas that are prone to climate risk. It's not just about, the beauty of a beachfront property anymore. It's about the long-term sustainability of that investment.
Exactly. And, that old playbook might need some serious revisions. We might start seeing a move toward more resilient building practices, stricter building codes, maybe even a shift away from traditional coastal development.
And what about the insurance industry itself? Are we looking at a future where, only the wealthy can afford to live on the coast? Because they're the only ones who can afford these crazy insurance premiums.
It's a real possibility. We might see more of those parametric insurance models, where payouts are tied to specific weather events instead of actual damages.
And what would that do?
Well, it could make insurance more affordable, but it also comes with, its own set of complexities.
It's a lot to think about, and it feels like we're just scratching the surface here. So for you, our listener, the one who's been with us on this deep dive, what's the takeaway? What can you do with this information?
Well, you know what they say, knowledge is power. And in this market, it's never been more important to be informed. So if you're thinking about a real estate investment in a coastal area, don't just factor in the purchase price. Think about those long-term insurance costs. Those numbers can make or break you.
And if you're already a homeowner in one of these areas, now's the time to really take a look at your insurance coverage, understand your risk, and see what options are out there.
Don't just assume that what you have now is going to be enough in the future. This market changes fast.
It really does.
Staying ahead of the curve is crucial.
Well said. It's a lot to process, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some things to think about. Whether you're an investor or a homeowner, just remember, stay informed, adapt, and make smart decisions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.